Well, the news that Australia had monitored the phones of the Indonesian president and his wife sparked a diplomatic crisis between the two countries. The Guardian Australia and the ABC published that story in recent weeks based on documents released by former National Security Agency employee Ed Snowden. Yesterday, The Guardian Australia published another story on spying. There's been criticism from some quarters of the ABC's decision to publish that initial story. Up to now, the ABC's managing director, Mark Scott, hasn't spoken at length to the media about that decision. He joins us now. Mark Scott, welcome. That publication of that story has undoubtedly led to the damage to the relationship between Australia and Indonesia. Do you have any regrets about publishing that story?
I think it was a very important story, Joe, and if you look around the world, stories out of this big leak of NSA material have been covered in newspapers, television stations. Nearly 20 major media outlets have done it. And yes, it has caused some short-term difficulty, but we absolutely feel it was in the public interest, that it was a significant news story, and then any major media organisation would have covered that story, and the ABC should have done it as well.
Why is it in the public interest for people to know whether spying agencies have monitored the phone of the Indonesian president and his wife?
Well, I think this information is out there, and I can understand there being great regret and remorse that this information has been released, but now it is out there and in the public domain. It goes pretty centrally to the kind of information that can be collected by electronic surveillance, by spy agencies, who that information is then shared with, and then how you keep that information secure. And the debate that we're having in Australia now about that is a debate that's taking place in the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, everywhere around the world. And so it's a pretty important, pretty central issue.
Everybody in the industry, though, seems to say that governments knew this was happening anyway, and the only thing that the publication of this story has led to is governments responding to public outrage over it and damaging the relationship.
Yeah, Joe, I think even the story that's running today that asks the question, well, what kind of information might be collected around citizens just going about their everyday work, phone calls and emails and the like? These are pretty important questions. It strikes me that it's easier, in a sense, to get this kind of information than ever before. But what rules should govern it? And then if this information is being collected, how do you keep it secure and who do you share it with? These are pretty important public interest questions, and this is a debate that's been triggered by the broadcasting and the publishing of these stories. And I think it's clearly a debate that the public is interested in.
What about Malcolm Turnbull's argument that the ABC has been used as a means of publication for a commercial organisation to increase the coverage of the story?
Yeah, I don't want to comment on private conversations I've had with politicians. I would say that every politician I meet has a view and a perspective on ABC stories or ABC programming. But I suppose I'd say this, that nearly 20 major media organisations around the world have published this NSA material. The Guardian came to us on that original story. We independently reported it. We checked it out. We went to our own sources around it. We thought it was absolutely a significant news story, and so we published it. We're an independent media organisation. And of course, sometimes we'll publish stories that politicians won't be happy about, but we are an independent media organisation. That's the role we need to play.
But why not wait until The Guardian had published that story themselves and just reported then what had been stated in The Guardian, rather than working in conjunction with them? Why did you decide
Well, we work in conjunction with other media organisations all the time. We did a number of stories this last year with Fairfax, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. The next major media partner we're working with is The Australian. And so we bring expertise to a certain story. We can add things that our partners perhaps can't, and of course we have a very significant distribution arm. And so I think the question really is, when an important story was presented to us, were we really going to walk away from that because it was controversial? We were going to walk away from that because it might generate a bit of political heat. That's a very tough thing for a public broadcaster to do, if in fact we're an independent public broadcaster.
What about the argument from some quarters that this may have potentially put lives at risk or further inflamed radical hatred of Australia in Indonesia and led to further attacks against Australia there? Because there were warnings from DFAT after these stories went to air.
Joe, Joe, there are a range of stories that come to us from time to time. We often take really quite detailed advice around the implications of those stories. There have been times we've held stories and haven't published them or broadcast them because of concerns that have been raised with us. We actually went to the authorities around this story. We did take some information out of that story on the back of their advice, and we managed it as best we can.
As you've mentioned, The Guardian published another spying story just in the last 24 hours. The ABC didn't collaborate with The Guardian on that story. Why was that a possibility and declined, or what happened?
Yeah.
What happened
well,
there?
our arrangement with The Guardian was around that original story. The Guardian have worked with different partners on different stories. The Guardian have published a lot of this material on their own. They published that story yesterday on their own. Not to say we won't work with them again, but our arrangement with them was around that original story.
And yeah, my next question was, is it likely that the ABC will collaborate with The Guardian again? Because presumably The Guardian is going through reams of documents that they've been
We don't have an
provided.
ongoing arrangement with them, Joe. I think it would depend on the story, and it would depend on our ability to independently verify that story, and it would depend on whether we felt that story was in the public interest. But we do need to be an independent public broadcaster. If you look at the organisations around the world that are publishing this material, it does include the New York Times, Channel 4 in the UK, ProPublica, as well as The Guardian. And we will just need to exercise our own editorial judgment on the public interest on a story-by-story basis if these stories come to us again.
You've been in the role now for several years. Over the past month or two, has this been one of the roughest periods in that several years?
Well, Joe, we've had a few things that have gone against us, of course. The release of the salary information was a breach done by the ABC that was embarrassing for us and disconcerting for staff. But I would say I think we've come under concentrated attack from News Corporation. Some sections of News Corporation, they seem quite obsessed by us. There seems to be a never-ending number of stories they want to run about the ABC. I think there are some people in News Corporation who have a deep ideological opposition to public broadcasting and the ABC. But I'm comforted by the fact that 85% of the Australian public, according to Newspoll, believe we provide a valuable service. 75% of Australians watch, listen, log on every week to ABC services, and every piece of research shows that the ABC is the most trusted and respected media organisation in the country. So we have some loud and noisy critics, but overwhelmingly we operate with great public support, and that gives us comfort and encouragement when the loud voices are shouting at us.
And with what's happening in the media landscape right now, I guess you can expect that criticism to continue for some time.
Yeah, I think in a sense there's some ideology behind some of the critics. I also think that there are some who think that they would make more money if in fact the ABC wasn't the ABC of today. But they're talking in terms of their shareholders. I'm interested in our shareholders. Our shareholders are the Australian people. And I think the Australian people overwhelmingly feel that the ABC is doing a great job and want us to keep doing what we're doing, which is being a fair and independent public broadcaster.
Okay, Mark Scott, thanks for talking to us.
Thanks, Joe.